Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing our Siege of Hefei Let's Talk Lore series with part 6 titled The 5th Siege of 234. Now last time we discussed the 4th Siege of Hefei in the year 233, where the sudden relocation of Hefei Castle caught Sun Quan off guard. But with Zhuge Liang and the Shu Han forces launching their 5th northern expedition in 234, Sun Quan decided the opportunity was ripe for another attempt on Hefei. This time, Sun Quan will once again personally lead the main army, numbering over 100,000 troops against New Hefei Castle, while 2 additional fronts will be added across the border with Lu Xun and Zhuge Jin launching an attack in the Jin province to the west targeting Jiangxia and Xiangyang, while Sun Shao and Zhang Cheng would attack Guangling in the east, as the 5th siege of Hefei in May of 234 would become the largest Wu attack on Wei under Sun Quan's reign. However, despite the amount of troops committed in this attack, Sun Quan was not hoping for a hard fight, as he believed Cao Rui would focus mainly on Zhuge Liang's attack out west rather than reinforcing the south. But for Manchong, the sheer size of this Wu attack was extremely concerning. At the time, Manchong was personally stationed in Shouchun, which was the capital of the Yang province, as the army camp conditions of Hefei were not suitable for him given his old age. The field commander at Hefei was a general by the name of Zhang Ying, so when Sun Quan arrived in May, Zhang Ying and the garrison at Hefei were the ones defending against Wu's siege. Hoping to reinforce his frontline defenders, Manchong started appealing to the Wei court for reinforcements. At that time, the Wei Western forces, as well as a good portion of the Central Army, had already been committed to go west with Sima Yi to face off against Zhuge Liang at Wuzhang Plains. And much of the Central Army reserves that had remained behind were actually on personal leave. So when Manchong's request arrived at court, the general opinion of the court was to not reinforce Manchong. General Tian Yu argued that the Wu siege on New Hefei Castle is unlikely to succeed, given how strong the fortification had been in all the previous attempts. Any reinforcement army sent to relieve the well-stocked position would likely be attacked by Sun Quan's main forces on the field. This would actually complicate the defense of Hefei and lead to unnecessary Wei losses. In his opinion, it would be far better to leave Hefei alone for the time being, and let Sun Quan waste manpower against its fortifications, which would also dampen Wu's morale over time. Then once the Wu morale was low, a reinforcement army would not only be able to relieve Hefei, but also break the Wu army. This opinion was supported at court by advisors Liu Shao, who was a well-respected scholar and a later-turned philosopher. So Emperor Cao Rui agreed, as Manchong was told that no reinforcement would be coming for the time being, and just to hold their defensive positions at Hefei and Shouchun. Frustrated by this response, Manchong then appealed to the court that if reinforcements were not going to be coming, then would it be alright to pull back the defenders at Hefei and retreat the entire Yang province forces into Shouchun, as while Hefei was holding and inflicting massive casualties onto the Wu army, the Wei forces inside were also taking heavy casualties. Not surprisingly, this request was also denied, as voluntarily giving up a defensive position as strong as Hefei was unacceptable. So in June of 234, after the siege of Hefei had been ongoing for a month, with no additional reinforcement coming, Manchong decided to take his own garrison and some fresh conscripts at Shouchun and reinforce Hefei himself. Once they had fought their way inside, Manchong quickly noticed that the wind was blowing in their favor. So he quickly organized the troops to make torches out of pine tree branches inside the city. Then these torches were soaked in oil before being lit and thrown over the wall downwind. And soon, the field in front of Hefei Castle was ablaze, spreading as far as where the Wu army were building their siege engines for the siege itself, And with many of the siege equipments catching on fire, General Sun Tai, who was Sun Quan's nephew, quickly led a force in an attempt to put out the fire and save the siege equipments. While the workshop where the siege engines were being built was typically just outside the range of the arrow fires from the castle, the extra gust of wind gave the defender inside Hefei more range. So under the command of Man Chong, archers started to rain arrows at Sun Tai's forces as they busied themselves fighting the fire. And it didn't take long for a stray arrow to find Sun Tai, as he would end up dying on the fields of Hefei, trying to save the Wu siege equipments from the fire set by Man Chong. Yet the death of his nephew and the loss of siege equipments did not deter Sun Quan, as the size of Man Chong's reinforcing army reaffirmed Sun Quan's initial assessment that Wei would not have the manpower to reinforce Hefei with Zhuge Liang's attack out west, so the costly siege would continue for another month as casualties mounted for both sides. Now at this point, disease once again became a factor as we're now in July, the height of summer in southern China, and with bodies littering the battlefield, disease was now spreading in both camps, but it hurt the Wu forces much harder given their massive number. Meanwhile, back in Luoyang, Emperor Cao Rui, after seeing Hefei's defense hold for 2 months, and now with Sun Quan's army ravaged by disease, felt the time was right to counterattack, as he wanted to personally lead the Central Army reserves and march to Hefei. Now, this decision was opposed by some at the court, like Wei Zhen, who felt the extra cost of having the emperor himself personally lead the army was unnecessary. But unable to convince their young emperor, Cao Rui and the Wei Central Army left for Hefei in late July. Now, while Wei Zhen's plea to have the emperor stay home was ignored, his tactic of sending out a smaller vanguard force and making it look bigger was accepted, as only 8,000 vanguard composed of 5,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry were sent ahead of the main army. But instead of having them carry the typical amount of banners and maintaining a tight formation on march, Wei Zhen suggested having them carry 3 times the amount of banners and march in a loose formation to give off the appearance that a massive reinforcement army was now headed for Hefei. And indeed, when Sun Quan's forward scouts returned with news that the Wei Emperor Cao Rui was now personally marching towards Hefei, and their vanguard force alone was already numbering around 30,000 strong, Sun Quan immediately decided that the battle was now over, as he never imagined that Cao Rui would come personally, especially with Zhuge Liang's attack out west. So before Cao Rui would even reach within 100 kilometers of Hefei, Sun Quan had packed up the army and retreated from Hefei for one final time in his life. Sun Shao and Zhang Cheng's attack on Guangling, which was close to Hefei, would also be called back out of fear that Cao Rui would march there next. Even though Lu Xun and Zhuge Jin would continue their attack on the Jin province for another month, when news that Sun Quan had already pulled back from Hefei finally reached them, they too decided to retreat without gaining much ground as the 5th siege of Hefei officially came to an end. Sun Quan would not lead another campaign by himself as he was already 52 years old by this time, but there would be another grand campaign launched by Wu under Sun Quan's reign 7 years later that would be led by General Quan Cong, where Hefei would not be the main target. But not much would come from that campaign either, as ultimately the Wei defense across the southern front would be too much for Wu to overcome, especially given the quality of the Wu army compared to that of the infantry-cavalry combination by the Wei forces. Now for the time being, we'll once again pause this series as there would be one final siege of Hefei during the Three Kingdoms period, but that one would occur after Sun Quan's death in the year 253, when Wu's regent, Zhuge Ke, would outdo even Sun Quan himself, as he would end up embarrassing himself with a defeat while leading 200,000 men. In the meantime, we'll be tackling a few other series to cover the events that would close out Sun Quan's life, So hopefully you all have enjoyed this episode enough to hit that like button to help support the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!